Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games and giant thunder lizards. Solosaurus is sponsored by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Visit them at stonevalleygames.com. And now, here come your hosts, stomping through the underbrush, Michael and Martin.
Are you going to say again that we should have some silence, but then immediately break the silence by saying that we have to have some silence?
Please, ladies and gentlemen, a moment of silence for this disaster of a recording. No, I'm kidding.
Well, at least the start of the recording. Where's the silence? I didn't hear the silence, actually, because somebody kept talking, i.e. me.
What are you talking about? I'm not talking. Are you talking?
All right.
Joe's just listening. That's all right.
Have you had enough silence? Have we filled our silence quota?
Enjoy the silence. Okay. We're going to do that joke again.
You really like Depeche Mode. That's the second episode you've done that joke.
Yeah, that's true. I'll probably strike that up or probably won't, because I say I will and I never do. And I don't feel like it. That's too much work to click there and change that. And
what editing podcasts? Who does that?
Oh my God, no, nobody does that. So, hello everyone. Welcome. Sorry, what was that? Say it again. Go ahead.
Enough tomfoolery.
Enough
Michael foolery.
There's just enough Michael foolery to go around here.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 83 of the Solosaurus podcast. I'm Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm the after two coffees version of Martin Gonzalez.
And I'm Joe Slack. I'm a game designer.
And as you can tell, we're here with Joe Slack, as he said. And he's a board game designer with most recently designed Relics of I was going to do this. Rajavihara. Relics of Rajavihara. Is that right?
Good.
You got it.
All right.
You got
David Turchi. See, I said David Turchi, right? See, that's like the third episode in a row I've done that right. So I'll have this title right by the next episode.
Wait, what does David Turchi have to do with this game?
Nothing, just for that pronunciation and my terrible ability at it. Apparently, I cannot enunciate.
You heard it here first, folks. The alternate solo mode designed by David Turchi.
Exactly. Sorry, Joe. That's just an ongoing joke because I murder names and Martin does it perfectly, and I just mess it up. So
I murder them perfectly so that nobody can tell.
There you go. Them. Cleanly, and it's gone. All right. So, Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming here with us to talk about game design and also your latest title as well. We're happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on.
I think we should mention right at the top of the show that, Joe, you've got the expansion to Relics of Rajavihara on Kickstarter as we speak, right?
That's right. Yeah, Montallo's Revenge, which is an extra 30 levels that builds on the base game.
Yeah, and I just realized that Montallo is the big baddie of the game, of the piece, right?
He is. He's your nemesis.
He's the nemesis. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, it's on Kickstarter now, and we are going to strive mightily to get this episode out while the campaign is still alive.
This podcast is brought to you by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Check them out at stonevalleygames.com or look them up on Facebook under Stone Valley Games. Did you know that most of the board and card games in his shop are solo-focused? This focus stems from Eric's, the owner's, life growing up on the farm, where getting friends together spread across 50 or so miles was difficult. And at the same time, that same concept carried into his military service as well. Often it was easier just to sit down and play a game by himself. Those games can generally be played with others, so when a few friends were available, he could show them the ropes quickly and get a multiplayer game in. But we all know about how easy it is just to sit down and play a game at your own choice. You can choose what game you want to play. You can choose how long you want to play it. You can choose to set it up and then put it away. And we all have felt that pain, I'm sure.
So I'm liking these personalized sponsor reads with slice of life of I'm learning a little bit more about Eric, our sponsor, as we go on. This is really cool.
Yeah, he sent quite a few of them, so I figured that looks good. We'll add that in there. So
good stuff.
Yeah, not bad.
Good stuff. I think Michael, that's a pretty innovative thing. I've never heard another podcast with kind of like these types of super personalized sponsor reads. Good job, man.
Well, no problem. Thank you. All right. Gosh,
I don't
I'm blushing.
because Michael's saying nice things. Martin's saying nice things about me. When's the other shoe going to drop?
Yeah. Well, what have you heard, Joe? Martin? What is this? A conspiracy, man? What's going on here?
No
All right,
comment.
anyway.
Paranoid. It's not paranoia if they actually are out to get you.
That's true. That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say that all the time, man, especially because they were after me. So, all right. So what have you been playing? That's the question at the top of the show here. I want to know what you guys have been playing. Joe, why don't you start us off? What have you been playing? Besides your own games, I mean.
Of course, yeah. Playing my games, playing lots of prototypes of other publishers or other soon-to-be published games, hopefully. But in terms of published games, and solo ones in particular, one I've got back into is Cristallo by Liberty Kiefer, which is a nice little solo puzzly game, which is a lot of fun.
Very cool.
I have played Cristallo myself. I'm gonna what is that? Like I knew it when it was still a print and play back in the contest back in 2018.
Oh yeah,
back in my day.
Another excellent abstract puzzle game with the mechanism of covering cards with other cards to form patterns. I think that's right, Joe.
Yeah, you got it exactly.
But also the theme is pretty amazing. There are all these like fairy animals that have been captured, and you're trying to free them. So, and it's just a deck of cards and some jewels, right? Those are pretty much the components.
Yeah,
that's enough.
54 cards.
We can't talk enough about Cristallo. And it was the first ever game design by Liberty Kiefer, and it really put her on the map. She won the contest with that one.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. Awesome. Anything else, Joe? Anything else you've been playing?
Yeah, Maquis is always one of my favorites. I always come back to that one. And the other one would be Isle of Cats. Both the multiplayer and the solo mode. I just can't get enough of that right now.
Right on. Yeah, Maquis is one of my first print and play games. Another one, it was designed by Jake Staines in 2013, and then eventually was brought to publication Kickstarter by Side Room Games, Dustin Culbertson, who we interviewed on the show a couple of episodes ago. My turn. I have been playing, and I had to pull up my BG Stats app on my phone to figure this out. On September 19th, I played Hadrian's Wall, which is by Garfield Games. It is a flip and write, technically. But, a lot of people, I posted about this on the social media, and then people were like, oh, another flip and write, I'm not interested. And I'm like, those who would dismiss this game as just, quote unquote, air quotes, just another flip and write, are doing themselves a disservice, because really what it is to me is it is a worker placement game where they decided, instead of putting in hundreds of workers and tokens and whatnot, we're just going to give you a player sheet and allow you to tick off what you've placed, quote unquote, and then what you get in return off of this player sheet. But really what it is if you like Euro games where it's all about chaining combos, it's all about I play something here and then I get this thing which allows me to do this other thing, and then you just all of a sudden you're chaining 10, 15, 20 different moves that you didn't expect. That this is it. This is the ultimate. It's got more combos than Lost Ruins of Arnak, and I love Lost Ruins of Arnak. So anyway, Hadrian's Wall by Garfield Games. Kind of hard to get right now. I think the only place where it's available is directly from the publisher. But it's an amazing, one of the best, quote, flip and write games I've ever played. And on September 20th, I played Clank in Space, a deck building adventure. So I've had the original Clank for years, and I like that okay. The solo modes for these games are all app driven. So I played Clank in Space for the first time. It's been on my wish list forever, but I figured I already had the first one and blah, blah, blah. So long story short, I get this to the table. It's a lot more refined than the first one. Yeah, the first one even had misspellings in the rule book and this kind of stuff. So from a rules perspective, from a one of the things that if you were playing the original Clank multiplayer, one of the kind of annoying things that were legal was, that you're playing with three other people. One person decides to rush right in, grab the first artifact they can get, and then rush out. And then this is going to end the game prematurely for everybody else. and then they win, which is super annoying, but not illegal. It's like a rush tactic. They totally fixed that from happening in Clank in Space. Can't do that anymore. And the app is a campaign. So you play it in episodes, and the vibe of this game is very humorous. They have like references to Star Trek, to Star Wars, to just all kinds of like humorous references that if you are a science fiction fan, you'll get extra enjoyment out of it. So yeah, Clank in Space, I really enjoy that one. The last one that I played recently on September 21 was Plague Incorporated, which is kind of like a board game version of a popular tablet game. Basically, you're a disease and you're trying to infect the world and kill all the humans. I know, far too soon, right? In fact, I was the blue player, so I called my disease Bluevid-19, just to add an extra, morbid streak there. Sadly, I did not like playing this game, and I don't think I'm going to play it again. The board game version falls way short of the iPad game. Sad to say. So those are the three games I've been playing, Michael and Joe. How about you, Michael?
Well, I played quite a few, actually. Well, I shouldn't say that. I played one, and I've got others to the table and didn't play them. What else is new? But the one I did play, Daunting the Purple, that is a absolutely brutal game. It's a solo capable, but it's also a multiplayer where you are the Roman emperor in 179 AD, I believe it is, about the time when the Roman Empire started slipping. And your job is to keep things together. And that is not easy at all because you've got roving barbarians, you've got famine to deal with, you've got natural disasters. And by the way, I don't think that event deck in that game has any good events in it at all. It's all terrible.
Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, here's a volcanic eruption, and hey, here have another famine. Yeah, have two. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Thanks. No, and then you're trying to build legions and you're trying to build monuments and you're trying to mitigate all this, but it feels like the bad things are like a flood. I need some more time with it to really figure things out, but it's fun trying to do that, and it's definitely not going to be an easy win if that does happen.
Not easy at all.
No. I also played something called Zermatt.
Never heard of that one.
Zurmat. It's a brand new game. I think it's going to be on Kickstarter here pretty soon from a company called Catastrophe Games. It's about conflict in Afghanistan around 2006 or so. It's a 2-player game. You've got one player doing the coalition, the other playing the Taliban, and you're basically trying to win hearts and minds in a local province. And the author of the game is actually a veteran that served in the area at the time. And so his perspectives are interesting and to see how this game plays out. Playing it 2-player, of course, solo, I have to play it multi-handed, but that's not really a big deal. There's some hidden information, but I can work around that. It's a pretty enjoyable game. I mean, I'm still dived too deeply into it. I've gotten it to the table a few times, and I've usually end up messing it up more than anything else. But that's on me. That's not on the game at all. It's a pretty straightforward, simple game that covers about a year of time in, as I said, in Afghanistan. So, and then I also got Excavation Earth to the table. It's a interesting game. It's pretty. It doesn't have a great big footprint, which is awesome. I learned it and then I packed it back up. But that's the problem with having so many games. It's like, well, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do the other, and boom, boom, boom. So there's that.
Who designed that one?
Excavation Earth. Good question.
I'm on BGG right now. Let's see.
You're going to beat me to it then.
Hey, look, your favorite name to pronounce. David
Turchi. Very good. I just, when I saw that at my FLGS, I had to have it because it's like, oh, this is such a cool idea where aliens are basically turning Earth into an archaeological dig because the humans have long gone, I think.
Yeah.
There was a book called Motel of the Mysteries that came out many years ago that fascinated me. That is about archaeologists on Earth, humans, who are digging up a motel. And they don't know it's a motel. They think it's a temple. So it just shows this disconnect between, when things really happen and when things are modern times. And, they're uncovering a room where there's a businessman and they're like, who's long gone, of course. And it's just fascinating to read what they think they're seeing in this room. And this kind of thing just kind of fueled my interest for this game. So can't wait to actually give it a try. And then finally, I played Marvel United. I actually played it a little bit. I got a expansion for Marvel United, the X-Men expansion, which is by far my favorite. The funny thing about that game is I think the base game's like $40 or so, but the expansions are like 80, 90, 100. It's insane. Yep. And I think that's where the game gets a lot of traction money-wise there. I mean, it takes, I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's just the demand for them.
The X-Men Kickstarter earned almost $4 million or something like that.
That's crazy.
It was ridiculous. Yeah. It was crazy.
I got a copy for about half that price, though. So it was about $30-$40 that I got. So I was like, I have to grab it. It was only one available, even though I've been stretching my game budget lately. I did it anyway.
Well, question for you. Did you play Marvel United using the did you play it like multi-handed, like co-op multi-handed, or did you play it with the Shield True Solo mode?
I have not done the Shield True Solo mode. I did it multi-handed just to kind of get a feel for how it plays. But I will get it back to the table because I do like the art. I do like the little figures. I forget what that style is called.
Chibi art style.
Chibi. Okay, there you go. Yeah. That is pretty cool art style. Anyway, so that is what I played this week. And now for some solo gaming news. Brought to you as always by TableFor1.me, where the Solosaurus podcast exclusively gets its one-player game news. Thanks as always to Frederick Schultz of TableFor1.me for his ongoing efforts to bring us the solo gaming news. The first one I'd like to kick this off with is a game called Critical Care, the Game. This is interesting to me because I used to be a paramedic many years ago, and I love games that deal with healthcare or any kind of trauma care, anything like that. They're on my radar immediately. This is looks like a 1 to 4 player game designed by Omari Akil and Dr. Lakshman Swamy, whose experiences in pulmonary and critical care as a pulmonary and critical care physician serves as inspiration for the game. So it's played over a course of a week, 7 days in the ICU. Each day is broken up into several phases. It looks like I really like the artwork and the cards that I can see here. During each shift, players draw and resolve a pager card and then do therapy and take care of patients. That represent real life events that happen in a hospital. You can be short staffed. Yes, that always happens. Whenever equipment breaks down too, that happens as well. So it looks like a really decent coverage of what happens in a hospital. Of course, I'd have to get it to the table to find out for sure. But hey, Martin, what are your thoughts on that offhand?
I had already heard of this one before we talked about it here in the news, and I was half tempted to actually back it. I like the theme. I am also kind of a fan of medical theme board games. I think there aren't enough of them. There was another one that I missed out on like a couple of years ago, Healthy Heart Hospital, which is
yeah, I have that one. It's a great game.
Okay, well, thank you for now making me want to get it again. But yeah, so you know what the thing about this game, like looking at the pictures, I just was a little bit turned off by the amount of text on each card. There seems to be a lot of text.
Yeah, I can see that. But it looks like they're different sections appeal to different parts of a game turn is what I'm thinking. Like the bottom text only bottom to certain part of the turn. I don't know. I could be wrong. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I still might actually bite into this, but I need to dive more into it. So it's good that you talked about it in the news. Cool. Joe, what do you think about? Have you heard about? And what do you think about? What is this game called? Critical Care, the game.
Yeah, this is interesting. This is actually the first time I've seen this, and it actually does interest me because I did work in healthcare for 17 years before I quit and became a game designer. Now, I wasn't on the patient care side. I was on like the data analysis, business intelligence, kind of like helping with the data to support various groups. But the critical care team was one of the teams that I was supporting in the last couple of years in my second last department when I was there. And so, yeah, this does look really interesting. I agree with the text comment that you made there, Martin. It looks like the middle section, it gives some details. It's kind of like Wingspan in a way, or some other games where it kind of gives you some background. So if you want to kind of learn more and understand more about like cardiac procedures and things like that, this is a good place to kind of like learn. You can be like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that. And you can have some knowledge. It's not necessarily for the gameplay, but just a little kind of added bonus feature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually a good point, and you're right. It did actually remind me of Wingspan. I don't know. It's just maybe it's a graphic design choice. The flavor text in Wingspan about the birds themselves is really small and in italic, and the cards are mainly white. I don't know. Just didn't seem as cluttered as these cards are looking at to me. But I'm that person. I latch on to specific things about like rule books and design and whatnot, and I get super picky. So. The next news item is One Deck Galaxy, and that is by Asmati Games, and it is designed by Chris Cieslik. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. So those of you who are solo players, you have to be familiar with I consider to be a classic game design, One Deck Dungeon, which was one of the very, very first games I ever purchased when I first started the hobby in 2017, sorry. And I love it. I've played it so many times, both physically and on the excellent app developed by Handelabra Games. And so One Deck Galaxy is the kind of space-based successor, but using the DNA of One Deck Dungeon. And Chris Cieslik, the designer on social media, he talked about this recently in response to a post I had made, just telling people, hey, One Deck Galaxy is on there now. He was saying that he took the opportunity to take the feedback that folks had said about One Deck Dungeon. One of the things was that, oh, it's so random, it's frustrating, which I disagree with, actually, because if you play it as a one-shot, yes. But if you play it as a campaign where if you die, and you are going to die, it's a roguelike, basically, game. You are going to die initially, but every time you die, you get a little bit more skill, or you get an item, or you get a stat bump. And that incrementally gets you more capable as a character. And then as you keep on playing, you get further and further into the game. So I understood that about One Deck Dungeon, and I, don't have a problem with it because that's very, that kind of permadeath, is very. If you play roguelike games on the computer, you're very used to that, and so but that didn't bother me. That said, supposedly One Deck Galaxy mitigates those types of issues and becomes easier to jump into, and is a Galaxy-based game. So that's kind of like One Deck Galaxy in a nutshell. And print and play fans, there is a full color print and play beta that you can get directly from the Asmati Games website. We can put that link in the show notes. But Joe, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts on One Deck Galaxy?
Yeah, it's surprisingly, I have not actually ever played One Deck Dungeon. I kind of looked at it and I was like, I'm not sure if it's a game for me. Unfortunately, I'm not as big on kind of space sci-fi themes necessarily, so I don't think it would be one for me, but it definitely does look like something that, somebody who's into One Deck Dungeon but wants kind of that theme or really likes that kind of space sci-fi theme, it could really appeal to them.
Yeah. Awesome. Michael, what are you thinking?
I do have One Deck Dungeon, and I've played it. It's a good game. And it's such a good game that I've actually had that expansion, Force of Shadows, on my radar for some time, but I just never pulled the trigger on it. And now I'm looking at it and I'm seeing, oh, there's another expansion, Abyssal Deaths. Oh, great. That's just what we need to know. But yeah, it's a good game. It's interesting. And just from the fact that I'm seeing a killer turnip on the cover, I think that looks like a game for me. Because that reminds me of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, that terrible movie from the 70s. And first I thought,
yeah, it may very well be a direct reference. I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, well, if anybody doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, well, you're missing out, so I suggest you go check that out.
I'm hearing the song in my head right now.
Oh, I am too.
That's not good. That's not a good song because it's what... Oh, spoiler alert. I don't want to spoil things, but... Okay.
Lucky you. Joe, hopefully you don't know what we're talking about there.
No clue.
Okay, good. Awesome. Well, that's great. As it shows my age there again. Oh, well. All right.
Back in my day.
Yeah, back in my day. So the last one that we would like to talk about is a game called Flamecraft. It says, enter a realm of magic and coffee making dragons in Flamecraft from publisher Cardboard Alchemy. It's a 1 to 5 player game that uses artisan dragons. The smaller and magically talented versions of their larger and destructive cousins are sought by shopkeepers so that they may delight customers with their flamecraft. You are a flamekeeper skilled in the art of conversing with dragons, placing them in their ideal home, and using enchantments to entice them to produce wondrous things. This sounds rather interesting. It sounds pretty light, but it sounds engaging. The only thing about it that I'm not sure about is the anime art style. And now I'm going to hear 100 people go, "Oh, how dare you? Anime is one." Yeah, that's great. But for me, I don't necessarily like it in my games. And I'm just weird like that, I guess. Like JRPGs on Steam, computer games, I'm just like, nah. I like watching anime, don't get me wrong. But I don't know. The art's still kind of engaging. It still looks interesting. I don't know. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I actually had the pleasure of playtesting this one in one of the virtual groups. So I actually saw this before it came to Kickstarter even. Now, I can't say anything about the solo mode because I played it multiplayer. But it was interesting. I would agree it's light. The art's kind of neat in kind of that anime style. It's a lot of kind of like moving around and kind of set collection, if I remember it properly. Nothing too complicated. But yeah, I'd never tried the solo mode, though.
It does say in Flamecraft 2 to 5 players, but then it says authors note the game supports solo play. And in 2 paragraphs above, it says 1 to 5 players. So I don't know. It sounds like it's a tacked on mode, perhaps. And everybody knows Martin and I are not huge fans of that kind of thing. But it might be good. I'm a solo. I don't know. But as a multiplayer game, I don't know. The art is kind of interesting. I like the art of the dragons. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on BGG right now, and the complexity rating is 2.3, which is very light.
Yeah, very
extremely. So cool. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it's pretty much a family weight game, and I think the art style kind of reflects that. That's the intended audience. So probably not aimed at serious solo hobbyists such as ourselves.
Not quite.
But it looks kind of fun. I'm not seeing the anime art style so much that you're pointing out here. I'm looking at the images on the on the BGG page, and they seem to be kind of anime inspired, but also kind of like having a classic fantasy feel to them. And I don't know. So also I just find it strange that you're like reacting to like anime here, but then you're not bothered by the chibi art style of the Marvel United, which is. It looks pretty anime to me.
That's different to me. I don't know. That looks different to me. I mean, they all look like a little pudgy. I don't know. They all look like pudgy heroes. It's kind of funny. It's definitely not a game to take seriously. But this particular one.
But if you if you like cute dragons, then this game has it in spades.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe not Game of Thrones type dragons, but still dragons. That'd be cool. All right, and that was the solo gaming news for this episode. Thanks again, as always, to Frederick Schultz of TableFor1.me for these news items. And now, for the main event, let's talk to Joe about his game designs and also Relics of Rajavihara, which we were both provided with a review copy by Joe. Joe, again, thanks for coming on to talk to us about it. Do you want to give us a little intro as to what Relics is in your own words?
Sure, absolutely. So Relics of Rajavihara basically takes one of those old school digital puzzle games, like maybe something you played on the old NES or a mobile app like Legend of Zelda, Adventures of Lolo, that type of thing, where you're having to move things around, like move around crates and blocks and try to complete a pattern or complete a level in order to move on and advance. Kind of takes that and puts it into the tabletop space with these nice 1-inch chunky blocks and a nice tactical experience where you have to, work your way through levels just like you would on a video game, through increasingly more challenging levels. So you start off with, you open a box and you have all these crates and you set up the levels and you have to, get the gem or defeat your nemesis. And then once you've beaten the first 10 levels, then you open a new box. So it's kind of legacy style in a way without actually destroying components, in that you get a new item with new functionality and new mechanics every time. So it kind of keeps it fresh and there's something new and more challenging being introduced. And you do that through a course of 50 levels. And then once you beat your nemesis, you open a mysterious X envelope where you get some replayable challenges and also some build your own level kind of designs. So it kind of incorporates all of that into a tabletop gaming experience.
That is pretty cool. So initially when I got this game from you, I don't know, Martin, how you felt initially, but I admit I am not a huge puzzle fan because I'm terrible at them. I think you can argue that any board game is technically a puzzle. So when I got this, I was kind of like, I don't know that this is going to appeal to me, but the components are through the roof. They're fantastic. Martin, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I cracked this open and, first of all, I am familiar with Tristram Rawson, who does the art. And it's funny because when Tristram posts, like Tristram is very generous and he'll post every new art or game he's working on, he'll post. And then he's always got this kind of charming, so what do you all think? As if he's unsure, as if he's not 100% sure of how amazing he is and how incredible his art. So I always comment on it and I tell him, look, it's incredible as always, Tristram. It's almost why do you even bother asking? And I know just he's such a nice person. So I saw the kind of, Raiders of the Lost Ark inspired art style of this game. And it's once again, just incredible. It draws you in. It drew me in. And then I opened it up. And then, the packaging is so cool. There's 5 sealed boxes in there, which it reminds me of the experience when you open up, if you're familiar with the game, Harry Potter, what was that deck building game? The deck building Harry Potter game. The name is not coming to me now. But when you open it up, because there's 7 Harry Potter books, there were 7 sealed boxes. And just like what Joe was saying, the more you play, the deeper you get into it, the more stuff and new stuff comes out. So there's that feeling of exploration and discovery, which I think is nicely mirrored in how you guys put together this package. And every box has different challenges, also different, spoiler alert, there's going to be more blocks with more capabilities, but also restrictions that will change how you figure out your gameplay. And there's more components. So a really, really nice kind of deluxe feeling package to me. And the last thing I'll mention is the rules are it's a small pamphlet and it's very clear. And the game design is, hey, we're just going to give you enough rules at the start for you to get going. And then we're going to gradually layer on complexity the more that you play. So these are all really, really cool design, both graphic design, art, and game design elements. So I want to compliment you on that, Joe, and say that I wish that my own game designs were as well thought through and polished and organized. But yeah, really, really nice. Those are all kind of so objectively, in fact, I was telling Michael on text before the show, I don't really see anything actually wrong with this game. You know what I mean? From an objective design standpoint, I think that you and Tristram nailed every aspect of what you were working on here. The one thing that I will sadly report is that I too am not a fan of abstract spatial puzzle games. And I felt this way. It's funny that you mentioned Cristallo. I told this to Liberty too at the time. I'm like, you've got an amazing, amazing game here that unfortunately is not my style of game. You know what I mean? So, but I can still appreciate it from a game design standpoint. I will say that, there were a couple of times playing your game, Joe, where I'm like, okay, here we are. I have no clue what I'm supposed to do. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to solve this, and I think my brain just gets stuck into these channels where it's like, I don't realize, oh, I can actually put a block beside this one, and I can jump on it, and then you know what I mean? Like, it takes me forever to figure out things that I guess to other people just like occur to them just like that, finger snap, you know. So anyway, those are my thoughts, feelings. I think it's an amazing, well-designed, very nicely packaged, slick game that is sadly, you know, not for me as a non-abstract puzzle game fan.
Oh yeah, well, thank you both very much just for commenting on that. And yeah, I mean, you brought some great points up there. First of all, Tristram, I agree. He's fantastic. I've loved working with him, and I'd love working with him again. He's worked on some great games. I gave him a lot of freedom with the game. I said, this is kind of my vision for it. Take it and run with it. And right. I knew he would do a great job, and he always does. And he is very generous and always looking for advice. Like he's very authentic about that. You know, posting things and saying, this, I think I'm going in the right direction. What do you think? And he takes that feedback, and people will say, oh, well, you know, the lettering's not quite right here, or the shade, like for one instance, somebody said the shading was off with the adventurer, Virginia Rivers, in the game. She's holding a torch, and the lighting, how it was like the shade from the lighting, it was in the wrong direction or something. It's like, oh, okay, like good point. Like if it wasn't for him, you know, just posting these things, you wouldn't catch these tiny little things that, you know, some people with really good attention to detail will pick up. And yeah, you were also saying about how you know, it's not necessarily the right kind of game for you. And as a game designer, it's a really tough thing, but you have to always be thinking, okay, the game that I'm making, I know it's not going to appeal to absolutely everybody. You're never going to make a game that appeals to, you know, the hardcore hobbyist and, you know, the newcomer to games and the people that like puzzle games, the people that don't. So it really means you have to, you know, dial down and say, okay, this is my niche. This is what I'm going for. I know it's not going to appeal to everybody, but the people that like puzzly type of games and would be excited by seeing, you know, one of them turned from like a digital experience into tabletop and being able to play around with the pieces. I mean, that's really what I was going for. And like you said, the curiosity and the opening up of new things, the discovery, that was very, very much intentional. How it would be one thing after another, just like in a lot of video games where you have a little bit of a tutorial. Okay, you know how, okay, here's how you jump. Here's how you shoot. Oh, here's how you take out this bad guy kind of thing. Like you're just learning a little bit at a time. So it's not a whole bunch of rules overhead. There's always something new to discover and explore and just bring some freshness to the game.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're absolutely right. And by the way, we should mention, I hope this is not too much of a spoiler, that part of the mystery of this game is that there's the mysterious envelope X. Yes. Sealed. There's a sealed envelope in there. And rumor has it that after you've played through the campaign, you can open that and then get more excitement with this game. What can you say about that, Joe?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but there's actually two different modes that open up in there. So in addition to some extra levels, kind of standalone levels that are in there, you'll also discover some extra challenges. So you'll basically relive some of the previous levels that you've done, but with all new challenges. So instead of just getting the gem, maybe there's, you know, a few different objectives you have to get, and the board is set up slightly differently, and you won't be able to play it at all the same way. You'll have to find out a different way to go about doing it because the levels changed just enough that, you know, the strategy you used is no longer viable because something's in the way. So you'll have to find different ways. And there's literally thousands of different combinations you can play. Plus, there's like a build your own type of a level where you are selectively piecing together a level and then having to solve it and getting harder and harder all the while too. So really appeals to people who want to do a little bit of kind of like a sandbox kind of build your own kind of a thing as well. So yeah, a couple different modes in there.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds really cool. Michael?
I'll say this now, as a wargamer at heart, and I've been doing Eurogames for some time, but I'm warming up to them more and more every day. This was completely outside of my experience zone, I got to say. But that doesn't mean I didn't find it engaging. As Martin said, I'm the same way. I puzzle games, and I even said I don't like them in general because I'm terrible at them, and wrapping my head around them are sometimes an issue. But Martin said this draws him in. It drew me in as well. I got to level 4 or 5. I believe before this interview. So I was like, I was just doing one after the other. And that's one of the appealing things about it is you do one level and it's like, oh, okay, let's do one more. Okay, let's do one more. Okay, let's do one more. And that's maybe one of the things you were going for in this game is to make them just be drawn in like that and just play it again and again and again. And then the other thing I kept thinking too is there's got to be multiple ways of solving this. Even though I kept thinking the whole time, am I doing this right? Did I push that right? Did I do this? And I think I asked you a question on Board Game Geek, and you responded really quickly. So that's another kudos for you there to help me out, because I was stuck early on. I think I was stuck on 1-1 actually, and I just, what the heck do I do? I don't know what to do. Oh my gosh! And I'm an idiot. I can't figure this out. God, and to your credit, you didn't offer any hints. You just kind of said something vague, and I thought, okay, well, I thought about it more, and then usually more often than not, it's like a slap yourself in the forehead. Oh my gosh, I see it now. Kind of a solution, and that's just a fantastic feeling when you figure this out. And for me, anyway, I mean, anybody else who gets that out of puzzle games might really enjoy this for that reason. But I did want to ask you, there is another box that came with it called Thrill Seeker Bonus Pack included in there as well. Is that part of the game, or is that something separate that people need to order?
Yeah, so on the original Kickstarter, there's two different versions of the game, and one was the base game, it was kind of the standard edition, and then you could get the deluxe version, which was with the Thrill Seeker tuck box as well, all these bonus levels. So there's actually 20 extra standalone levels you can get. And with the new campaign that's on Kickstarter right now, I've decided to just include everything all at once. So you'll actually get that all in one box. So you'll get an extra 20 levels plus the 10 that were part of the original stretch goals from the original game or original campaign. So there's actually a total of 80 levels that you'll get with the base game now if you back it on Kickstarter.
Very cool. Yeah, like I said, I got to 4 or 5. I haven't opened that yet. I mean, I did to look at it, but just kind of briefly, and I'm like, oh, I probably shouldn't look at this right now. So I slid it back in. But this game is something, like I said, it's not normally something I would go for, but I am intrigued enough that I want to finish it before I put it back on my shelf, kind of a thing. So I'm definitely going to want to play through the rest of it there.
Hey, Michael.
Yep.
You're going to finish all 50 levels?
Yeah, I am.
I hate to break it to you, buddy, but it sounds like you're a fan of abstract puzzle games.
No, not. No.
You have become the thing that you thought you weren't.
Hey, that's okay, because you, for the longest time, and me even to an extent, never thought that I would be a big fan of deck builders or engine builders, but I'm warming up to that. So this might be another one of those moments where I'm just having my mind expanded, man. Wow.
Looks like the shoe is on the other foot this time.
Although this time it's a boot.
Good reference. Very good reference. So, Joe, tell us, first off, well, you know what? I'd like to ask, what was your first board game purchase? What was the first game you played that really sent you down this long, winding road?
Well, I've been a board gamer all my life. So, as a kid, as most of us did, played, Monopoly and Clue and Risk and all those games. Mm-hmm. But in terms of modern games, a number of years ago, I remember my wife was watching Tabletop with Will Wheaton. A friend got her into that. And one day, after watching a bunch of episodes, she's like, okay, we got to go to the store, and I've got a list of these games that we need to buy now. I'm like, okay. So we went and got them, and I was like, I hope these are all good, because I hadn't played, a lot of the modern board games. And we wound up getting 5 games, and they were all really, really interesting, and got me like really interested in learning and playing more games. But I would say the one that really stood out to me was Pandemic, because I'd never played a cooperative game. And it was just really cool experiencing that for the first time, being able to, do all these different actions, work together, try to win together. So that really got me into the more modern board games. And then, as you probably experience yourself, then you want to play all the games, and every game you play, you want to own and buy. So the collection expanded quickly after that.
Very cool. Very cool. Pandemic was one of my first modern board gaming experiences as well. So, Joe, how did you first get involved in game design, in solo game design? I'm looking you up on BGG now. You've got about 8 or so designs to your credit. What was your history as a solo game designer?
Well, I started out as a kind of regular game designer, if you could say that. Started with a party game, And it was just more of the experience of, we're playing this with friends. How could I change this up to make it, different and more enjoyable? And then kind of started branching out from there and trying all sorts of different games. And then a few years back, discovered solo games with Friday and Unbroken and Cristallo and all these other great games. And realizing, how much I enjoyed the solo gaming experience myself, and knowing obviously there's a big market for it. A lot of people are looking for that solo experience, whether it's a solo mode that's part of a multiplayer game or just a straight up solo game. And the first one was Relics of Rajavihara, the first game that I started working on as a solo game. So it was more experiencing one game in particular called Fire and Ice on the NES that I absolutely love. It's a great puzzle game. And I was playing that, and after I completed the game, I was like, wow, I would love to see what this looks like as a tabletop experience. Could that be made where you're, pushing around things and trying to solve the levels? So I just, grabbed a bunch of blocks, made up a very simple little grid, and started pushing things around and got the concept down, and was like, yeah, I think this could actually work. So that was my first solo design. And, I've been working on a couple other games that, hopefully one day will be out in one way or another. But that's really how I got started.
Oh, you heard it here first, folks. We got more stuff coming down the pike from the designer of Relics of Rajavihara. It's very exciting. All right, Michael, over to you.
So, Joe, what's your absolute favorite solo board game? Besides yours, of course. You can't say yours.
No, I wouldn't say. I would say right now, I think Maquis. It's just such a great little game. You can break it out, get it to table really quickly. You always have these different objectives, and it's always an interesting challenge. Sometimes you get caught right away, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm just this game's gonna be over really quick. And other times you're just struggling and trying to push your way through, trying to get those missions accomplished before I think it's day 15. I'm really excited and looking forward to the additional content that came out. They had a Kickstarter earlier this year where they had some additional objectives and that type of thing. So I'm interested to see where they go with that.
Yeah, awesome. That game is brutal too. I've never won it.
Oh no.
No, I've never won it. But again, because it's a puzzle, kind of a puzzle, and I am not an optimization, figuring out what's the most optimal way that I can use my limited number of workers, and how do I block certain paths. And anyway, Joe, I want to ask you, what is your philosophy towards solo gaming and solo game designs? And I want to frame this by saying that it seems to me, and it seems borne out by the solo game designers we've been talking to recently, David Thompson, Drake Villarreal, some other folks, that there seems to be a trend, well, a couple of different trends. One is toward kind of way streamlined AI decks like Lost Ruins of Arnak or Dune Imperium, where when you want to resolve what the solo AI does, you basically have a deck and then you flip over the card and there's a couple of icons and then you just follow what it tells you to do and then you're done. And then it really allows you to just focus on your own game. That's one trend. And then there's another trend, and generally more complex games are going to have this where it's a decision tree. And then you kind of have to go and down the decision tree and see what is relevant or not until you get to, this is the thing that, this is the line in the decision tree that refers to the current situation. So that's what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? I've seen that in games like Blitzkrieg, which is a solo mode designed by David Churchy, and those types of things. So where do you stand? Are you seeing these trends as well? And where do you stand? What's your philosophy towards solo gaming and solo game design?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to gravitate towards more the first one you said, the more simple, you flip a card, this is how it's resolved, this is what your opponent gets kind of thing. And then, okay, how do I go about, battling with my opponent and besting them based on what they've just done, that kind of thing. I think it just makes it a lot easier because, when you're playing a solo game, you're already making all these, tough decisions, and most really good solo games have made it so it's really challenging. So you have to make tough decisions and make, what's my choice? What direction am I going to go in? What strategy am I going to take? You don't have to think about too much about, okay, now I got to play a second hand completely and figure out what they would have done and that kind of thing. It's enough to just say, okay, this is the direction they're going. Okay, well, how do I continue with my strategy, or have they thwarted that strategy and I have to try a different way? So I think that happens a lot in a multiplayer game where they've got this kind of AI system, as opposed to a game that's strictly solo, that's really based around, okay, here's what you have to do, here's what you have to accomplish, you have some objectives. So I think in terms of designing a multiplayer game that has a really good solo mode, I think that simple AI system where it's just a card or a couple cards that define what happens, I think that makes it a lot easier and makes it a better, more enjoyable experience for most players, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'm for the more streamlined as well. Yeah. Michael, over to you.
Joe, who's your favorite board game designer and why?
Board game designer. Oh, that's a tough question. I don't want to leave any out because there's so many good ones. But I mean, I would have to say Matt Leacock is fantastic. I mean, I've really enjoyed Pandemic and any other variations, Pandemic Legacy, all the Forbidden series, Forbidden Sky, Forbidden Desert, Forbidden Island. I think he's just fantastic at what he does. He just does it really, really well.
Is there a solo game out there that you wish you had designed? And I guess I'll tack on this other one. If you had designed it, what would you have changed about it? Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, good question. While not being a strictly solo design, I would say I would have loved to have come up with Isle of Cats. I think it's fantastic. I love puzzly, Tetris-y type games where you're having to place these little polyomino pieces and try to figure out the best way to place them, and place them, and then you score this, or try to gather so many of the certain type together. So I enjoy both the multiplayer and solo mode for that game. So I really wish that I had come up with something like that. But in terms of anything that I would change with the game, that's a tough one, because I think it's done really well. I think maybe some more variation to the boards to some extent. Maybe the AI system too. I find it can be really, really tough or not too challenging depending on what you draw. And I mean, there are different modes. You can make it more difficult by drawing more of the advanced solo lessons, which makes it much tougher for sure. But sometimes a combination that you draw, you can come up and you can look at it and say, okay, these are all different things. So no matter what I do, the AI opponent might, who's your sister in that case, she's going to be scoring no matter what I do. Whereas sometimes when you draw a combination of cards, you're like, okay, all I have to do is avoid doing this, and I'm going to probably win this game. So I think maybe there could have been a little bit more in the design there, just to make sure that the challenge is always going to be good, and there's not going to be too many of those lessons that are kind of matched well together, that you can just say, well, if I can just avoid this strategy, or just avoid my sister getting points in this region, I'll probably be good.
All right, thank you so much for that. And now I am interested in Isle of Cats. Although sleep, domino, these are the things that I read, and I'm like, I'm just not smart enough for that stuff. But you've made it. You've given me an insight into this. So thank you so much, Michael.
Joe, what outside of board games and board gaming would you say influences you the most in your designs?
Ooh,
you've kind of talked about it briefly before, but I'm just curious.
I'd say my game design ideas can come from anywhere. Anything from watching a show or a movie, playing a video game, just having a conversation with somebody, and the idea pops in my head. That could be a game. So very much. I've definitely looked at some video games and said, could I make that experience into a board game? How would that work? Like with Relics, or with another game design that's very much on the back burner for me right now, but I have an idea for one that's more of like an RPG kind of game, more in the style of like a Dragon Warrior or the early Final Fantasy. What would that look like as a board game? And I've also designed some games that are very much based on like something I've seen in a movie. Like I've got a game that I'm co-designing called Jewel Heist that is based on one particular scene from the movie Thomas Crown Affair, where it's called the bowler hat scene, where there's all these different characters walking around. They all look exactly the same, with a bowler hat and a briefcase, and they're walking around. One drops a briefcase, the other one goes and picks it up. They're walking around, and the the police there or the investigators are trying to figure out who is the one that has the briefcase that has this painting that this character is supposedly stolen. And I've created a game with a co-designer that's completely around that one scene, that one memorable experience from the movie. So it really can come from anywhere. Sometimes it's just even a name, an idea, a comedy sketch even has generated an idea for a game.
The first thing I thought of was the Ministry of Silly Walks from
Monty Python. When he said bowler hat and briefcases, I was like, hey, that would be a good game.
More of a dexterity game, really.
Yeah, pretty much.
Awesome, though. I kind of just like take a moment outside of the questions as a comment. I really love these kinds of conversations where we get these glimpses into the thought processes of folks who design solo games. I think it's so fascinating and also so inspiring for me personally as somebody who has tried his own hand at, anyway, I just think it's fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that. Speaking of solo game design, okay, so let's say, Joe, you're going to sit down, you're going to design a new game. What does that look like? You sit down, I suppose, at your computer. What tools are you going to fire up? What help you in your solo game design at the various stages of your solo game design process?
Well, the initial idea, I try to get it to the table quickly. Like if it's something I'm really interested in. Obviously, if I'm working on a bunch of other games, I can't just drop everything. Sometimes it'll just be, okay, make a note of this and I'll come back to it later. But when I sit down and say, okay, how am I going to create this? I want to get a prototype to the table as quickly as possible. So sometimes if it's just like a very simple card game idea rather, I'll just write down a bunch of values or different things on cards, and then just kind of test it out, see how it works. Or I might go to the computer and say, okay, I think I'm going to need, some animals or something like that. So let's grab some quick clip art or just, write the name of an animal. Okay, this is an elephant card. This is a penguin card, or whatever it is. And just get it to the table and just try to test it out by myself and see how that works. And then as I'm developing it further and, playtesting with other people and need to make rapid changes, one of the tools I really like right now is a software called Nandeck, which allows you to take like an Excel sheet that has a list of all these cards or tokens, whatever it is, and you can make one change in the file, hit a validate button, and it'll just update all the cards in there, and then you can very easily spit that off as a PDF that you can print off if you're doing a physical copy, or individual image files that you can very quickly upload to Tabletop Simulator. So Tabletop Simulator is another tool that I use a lot for playtesting online because, for the last 18 months, it's been really, really hard to get together with other people to playtest. So Tabletop Simulator has been a bit of a savior in that way.
That is awesome. Yeah, I too will put in the good word for tools like Nandeck, which is free, by the way, as I understand it. I'm on a Mac, so I have the kind of Mac version of it called Multideck. But it's the same kind of idea that you have to change your mindset or your your mindset about like how I'm going to design the card from visually in an image editing program to specifying its elements in a spreadsheet and then exporting to a comma separated values or CSV file, and then having the program read that, and then you can compose the elements inside of that program. It's a very interesting shift, but if you can make that shift, it allows you to rapidly prototype cards. I 100% agree with that.
Absolutely,
Michael.
So, Joe, I'm sure you've had plenty of conversations with people who are not board gamers. So if somebody one of those people asked you what you do for a living, how would you describe game design to a non-gamer? Or would that be the most difficult thing in the world?
Well, I mean, if I say, I design games, I design board games, if somebody's, a non-gamer or, don't play a whole lot of games, some people will say, oh, like Monopoly? That's usually, the first question that comes back. I'm like, and you don't want to, make them feel bad, that they brought up a game that's, I don't know how old it is now, like 80 years old or so, maybe even more, because there's been so many more along those lines. You can say, yeah, like that, but modern games have changed a lot since then. But yeah, I make games that people play and hopefully enjoy, and that's what I do, and hopefully when they have mentioned Monopoly or Clue or Scrabble or something like that, then at least they have an idea of what I do. But yeah, I mean they probably have, just like I had, no idea when I first started out how much work and what actually goes into designing a game. It's not just like, oh, I got an idea, let's put it down on paper. Oh, let's sell this. No, it's like there's so much more that goes into designing the game and playtesting it and improving it and perfecting it to the best game it can be.
Exactly. Isn't that hilarious that when a non-gamer or somebody who's only heard of like Clue or Careers or Monopoly or Payday or whatever, the old Milton Bradley games, they go, there's other games besides that? That revelation that they have, it's kind of a cool thing. Like you've got a convert.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's an awesome feeling. Yeah. Martin.
Yeah, well, it's also like a discovery, right? Or that feeling of, if all you knew was this one level of, kind of like retail games or family games or whatnot, and then all of a sudden it becomes revealed unto you that there's a whole much deeper layer of, games with different mechanisms and no player elimination and mitigate randomness and all this stuff. I felt this kind of like the next chamber opened up, and then the light was streaming on my face to pull the Raiders of the Lost Ark analogy a little further, right? So I think that's kind of cool. Joe, I'll ask you a question about simplicity versus complexity in board games, in solo games in particular, and I'll frame this by something that I think I mentioned on the podcast before. I watched an interview with Martin Wallace, the game designer of, I don't know how many hundreds of games he's designed at this point, but notably Brass Birmingham and let's see, Hit Z Road, which is one of my favorites. And he's famous for designing these like complex, economic simulation games with train mechanisms and whatnot. But then, he was talking about he likes to design from a place of initial simplicity, and then the complexity reveals itself kind of gradually, kind of progressively, the further on you play. And he likes the idea of emergent complexity, right? Like so that he likes games that are easy enough to learn the basic mechanisms, and then it is in the kind of interactions between those mechanisms as you go on playing that the complexity kind of naturally or organically comes out. And so I wanted to get your take on that. And I think based on how you've chosen to design Relics, I already think I know what your answer is, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
The more complex, the better. No, just kidding. Yeah, I think I definitely appreciate simplicity, in particular in terms of rules. I don't want to, have to sit and read, 100 pages of rules and have all these complex things and have to keep referring back to it. I try to design games that are very easy to get to the table and teach somebody in just a few minutes, where you can, just open up, say, here's all the things you do in the game, and then people are like, oh, okay, that's all I do. I just do these 2 actions on my turn, or just this one thing. Okay, that's very simple. But then once somebody starts playing, then they're gonna be like, oh, okay, my decision of what I do, this is gonna really matter, because if I do this now, then will I be able to do this other thing later, or I have to make a choice. I have to pick a strategy kind of at this point. That's what I love. Those emerging strategies, like a game that's simple like Azul or something like that. Oh, I'm just taking tiles of one color. Okay, no problem. But then, where do you place them? Okay, what do you do with them? How am I going to go about scoring them? What am I going to go for next? What am I planning for the rest of this round? It can be a very simple rule set, but then leads to a lot of strategy and thinking with those emergent patterns that kind of come out.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I prefer those games that are easy to learn. I have famously struggled with rules comprehension of complex rules. Easy to get to the table, but then has satisfying complexity that kind of emerges out of the gameplay. That I wish that there were more games like that. I also like a very well-defined turn sequence without a lot of exceptions. That you have to keep referring endlessly back to the rule book to kind of figure out, because otherwise then I'm playing wrong, which happens a lot of the time. Anyway, Michael.
So Joe, what would you say is a mechanic or something like a real aesthetic touch mechanic in a board game that you think is just awesome, but is not represented, but should be represented more in board gaming?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. Oh, I think you got a stumper on me here.
That's all right. I can edit out the dead air, so it sounds like you answered it immediately.
Roll and move. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, way more roll and move. Way more roll and move. I don't know if it's underused, but one that I really love is action selection, where you have one action or two actions or three actions, four actions, whatever it is, and from this list of different things you have to do, and you have to figure out, okay, how can I most efficiently do this, on my turn? And it quite often comes up in a co-op game as well, where okay, well, I can do these things, and then but then you're going to have to be doing these things. But what if something happens in between? And then you have to change your strategy around. But it gives you a lot of different options. But really, really good game designs are done so that you have four options on your turn, but you really want to do five things. I think that's really, really intriguing when a game is designed really well, so that there's always one more thing you wish you could do, but you can't. So then you have to make that hard decision. Well, I can't do all these things. Which one am I going to leave off? Which am I going to hold off to the next turn and hope that the whole thing doesn't run amok on me? So I would say action selection is a great one.
That's a good one. Yeah, like you said, it's great when a game can do that and give you X amount of actions, but you really want X plus 1 or X plus 2 or X plus 4, and you can't do everything that you want to do in one turn. Yeah, for sure.
Before we asked the last question, I was just reading about somebody's comment on social media about kind of engine building games and how they get frustrated with these engine building games that are at a limited number of rounds. Let's say Lost Ruins of Arnak, it caps at 5 rounds, and the kind of challenge is to be able to do however much and score however much you can within those 5 rounds. And they feel that just when my engine is getting going and I want to have some time to enjoy it, the game ends, and it's frustrating, So they're actually asking for recommendations of what are some type of engine building games where they don't get capped after a certain number of rounds and they can just keep going. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, that sounds like it would be cool in theory, but in practice, I think if you keep on playing, if you don't set that restriction, then it just becomes uninteresting, right? Because once your engine becomes built up and you can basically, if it becomes so powerful, then there's no challenge in the game that, that you can't overcome. Yeah. So I think they're asking for some kind of, it's more of an existential question, isn't it?
I've heard some discussions about this though too. I can't remember if it was an interview or something else. I was just hearing some people talk about this, but yeah, some people made a really good point that you kind of want the game to end at a point where people want more.
Right.
And also if they were able to do those last couple turns where they were able to combo these big, huge things and gather all this stuff, then they might have a feeling like, oh, okay, well, I got everything I wanted. Like there's nothing more that I could get. Maybe people wouldn't come back to that game over and over again because, they have a feeling, well, I've already accomplished this. I've already kind of, figured it out, so to speak, and got everything I could from the game.
Exactly. Yeah. So that person kind of thinks they know what they want, but they don't really want that, I don't think. Okay. Joe, last question for you. What are you working on right now? And let's fold into this. Tell us a little more about the expansion to Relics of Rajavihara that is on Kickstarter right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I continue to work on that, and I'm always working on more levels for the game because I just love designing them and coming up with new challenges for people. So yeah, Montello's Revenge, I've actually just added 5 bonus levels to the game on Kickstarter. So anybody's going to get actually 35 instead of 30 new levels. But aside from that, I'm working on some other games. One's called, at least tentatively called BBQ SOS. And it's a game about backyard barbecuing where you've got all these friends and neighbors all gathered around, but there's only one grill, and everybody's trying to prove that they're the king or queen of the grill. I'm the best of the grill, right? So, going back to the polyomino pieces, that's what you're doing. You're trying to take these orders of food. It could be burgers, steak, tofu, whatever, vegetables, and get them onto the grill with certain placement rules. But there's only a limited amount of space, and you're all competing for that same space. But it combines that with time and resource management because when you pick up your item, food will go bad if it sits too long or if it cooks too long. So you have to kind of time things to get on the grill at the right time, off the grill at the right time, and people can adjust the temperatures because they may want to cook a little bit faster than you do, and you have to kind of adapt and change to that. So that's a game we've been working on right now with my co-designer.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like so much fun. All right, Michael, over to you.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Wow. I mean, it's funny how you get introduced to ideas like this and you're like, wow, that sounds great. Like Ben Franklin in an episode 80 of ours talked about herding cats. And it's like, I never would have thought of doing a game like that. That sounds great. Same with backyard barbecuing. That sounds really good.
You just don't want to mix those two games together. You don't want the cats to go on the grill, I think.
Oh, yeah. Be knocking it over and lighting cats on fire left and right. You know?
SPCA barbecue.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
All right. Well, this wraps up episode 83 of the Solosaurus podcast. We are proud to be part of the Dice Tower Network. And for even more Solosaurus, join us for our post-show discussions, other shenanigans on Facebook at facebook.com/Solosaurus. Follow us on Instagram at Solosaurus Podcast, or shoot us an email at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com.
And we are on, you can find our show on Board Game Geek. The quickest way really is to just fire up your favorite search engine and search for Solosaurus BGG, and you'll find our page there. As always, if you would like to show off your fandom of this show, you would like to sport your very own micro badge on Board Game Geek, hit me up. My handle on Board Game Geek is Dr. Henry Armitage. That's Dr. Henry Armitage, and I will spot you the Geek Gold so that you can get your very own Solosaurus micro badge.
Thanks again to Stone Valley Games for being our sponsor, and thank you, Joe, for taking the time to sit with us today. As always, if there's any particular games you'd like us to take a look at, send us an email or drop us a message on social media. As always, I'm Michael Eckenfels.
I'm Martin Gonzalez.
And I'm Joe Sack. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.